Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's nice to see you all. Today I would like to talk about something that I think is a very important but also a neglected subject in foreign language learning. Over the last few years I've spent in the region of, a couple of thousand hours teaching English to native speakers of Russian. Now I am not picking on them. This is a general problem in language learning, but I am going to talk about it today through the prism, if you like, of these Russian speakers, because it is through them that I've experienced this phenomenon most clearly. To cut a long story short, many people, when they start trying to speak a foreign language, almost completely lose the ability to project themselves as human beings. Any number of times when I've been listening to the English of students who do not speak English very well, I have realized that 30 seconds have gone by without me actually paying much attention to what they've been saying. You suddenly sort of swim back into consciousness and realize that you've not been listening. Now you might think that that makes me a bad teacher who doesn't care about his students or who doesn't care what they're talking about. That is not strictly true. It occurred to me eventually that when people do not speak a language particularly well, they focus very intently on this task of producing sentences in the language that they're speaking, and they completely forget about the importance of investing what they say with some sort of life, some sort of energy, some sort of interest, some sort of ability to suck their listener in. I'm not saying here that people have poor grammar or a poor understanding of our English vocabulary or poor pronunciation. That's not what I'm saying. They may be poor in these various regards, but that is not the problem. The problem is that they lose the ability to structure their sentences and to phonetically produce those sentences in the way that you have to if you want to build and maintain interest in the person that you are speaking to. Some of these mechanisms are to do with sentence structure. They are to do with a great understanding, certainly the great understanding that natives have with respect to how to structure a story or a discourse, how to connect the different parts of that story together. But what I want to focus on today are the prosodic features of language that allow us to build and maintain interest on the part of our listeners in what we're saying. So when I talk about prosodic features, I'm talking about intonation, dynamics, rhythm, timing. The term prosody is not easy to define in phonetics and phonology, but it refers to those characteristics of spoken language that are imposed from above, as it were, upon an utterance. So I can say, for example, "What are you doing?" And I can also say, "What are you doing?" And I can also say, "What are you doing?" And I can say, "What are you doing?" Right? That's all the same question in one sense. But we use pitch, intonation, stress, rhythm, timing to build what are actually quite different questions. What are you doing? And what are you doing? Any native English speaker will be able to feel that those two questions are quite different things, right? This is the type of thing that I'm talking about here. So we have intonation. Intonation, at least if we're talking about English, is basically the way the pitch of what you're saying changes as you say it. So I can take this and I can say, "I can't believe this guy." It sounds a little bit like a speech synthesizer, one of those things they had back in the 80s, the primitive ones. Then you can say, "I can't believe this guy," which sounds a bit more natural, but which is still a bit flat. And then you can say, "I can't believe this guy," which sounds like the type of thing that a native English speaker would say if they were emotionally invested in what they were saying and were expressing an element of surprise about what this guy was up to or had been up to. Another example would be, what on earth are you talking about? You can say it the robotic way, what on earth are you talking about? You can say, what on earth are you talking about? Which is fairly flat. There's a bit of emotion being invested in that. Or you could say, what on earth are you talking about? Which is much more invested. We're using stress, we're using pitch, intonation, actually also using facial expression there to convey this sense of outrage or surprise or alarm, right? But let's forget about facial expressions. You can hear, what on earth are you talking about? That is something that's going to switch our brain on and make us listen to what's being said. Whereas if I say, what on earth are you talking about? It sounds weird. There's no reason to say it in that flat tone of voice, right? A lot of this stuff just vanishes when you listen to non-natives who don't speak your language very well. And even sometimes with people who do speak it quite well. And when it vanishes, you find that it's harder to concentrate on just what the hell people are talking about. The next thing we have is what I'm going to call dynamics. Yeah, we can talk louder or more softly. So think of the following. So I said to him, what are you doing? And he said to me, what do you think I'm doing? You can hear that in those two quotes there, what are you doing? What do you think I'm doing? I used certain intonation and stress patterns, but I also raised my voice a bit. So I said to him, what are you doing? And he said to me, what do you think I'm doing? Yeah, we can do this a lot when we speak. I can talk like this, but I can also talk like this. Yeah, the but is a way of creating structure in what's being said. That sudden increase in volume is a way of keeping your listener engaged. It's a way of communicating to them what's important and what's not. Again, another example. What I'm trying to get across to you is that there's nothing there. Now, if you speak like that, if you set something up and then say it relatively loudly, that can be considered quite aggressive, of course. What I'm trying to say to you is that there's nothing there. That can be a bit aggressive. But the point is that that too is a type of emotional affect that we native speakers can put into the type of stuff that we say. A lot of this stuff just vanishes in the speech of non-natives. And you don't have to be aggressive, right? You don't have to be aggressive. I can speak relatively quietly, and then I can say, but you don't have to speak like that. I can lift the volume of my voice a little bit in a completely non-aggressive fashion, just to draw attention to what I'm saying. Yeah, just to stress its importance to me and the fact that I think it should be important to you. We do this stuff all the time in our own languages, but when we speak foreign languages, we often either don't think about it or somehow lose the ability to do it. Last but not least, we have what I'm going to call structure stroke timing. And this one arguably is the most important of all. What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! There's a sort of, what do you call it again? There's a sort of call response element. That was supposed to be one person speaking, right? In the example I just gave. What do we want? Justice! If I say, what do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. That sounds a bit weird. What do we want? Justice. When do we want it? Now. No, that's not how that works. What do we want? Justice! You have to wait. You have to let the question sink in to the listener's mind before you give the answer to the question. Otherwise, you're just blowing your own feet off, right? This is timing. This is structure. This is very important. And another thing, that TV needs to be taken to the dump. And another thing, pause. That TV, pause to let that sink in, needs to be taken to the dump. If you run it all together, and another thing, that TV needs to be taken to the dump, that's okay, but it's flat as a pancake. It's just flat as a pancake. It doesn't create any sort of emotional sense of anything at all on the part of the listener. I'm going to go back to one of the examples that I had a moment ago, and I'm going to examine it slightly differently now. So I said to him, what are you doing? And he said to me, what do you think I'm doing? Listen to the pauses, right? And I said to him, what are you doing? And he said to me, "What do you think I'm doing?" If you run it together, it sounds like. And I said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said to me, "What do you think I'm doing?" That's a really bad Russian accent. I can do a better Russian accent if I concentrate. But I sometimes have that accent in my mind when I think about this stuff. Because like I said earlier in the video, a lot of this stuff, a lot of these realizations have come to me from listening to Russians. And when I think of my efforts to teach people English, I normally think of things via those experiences. Again, these pauses, this timing, this structure that we impose on what we say by waiting and not saying things, this is really important. And when you take it out, it's so hard to concentrate on what people say. You just can't do it. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to do my bad Russian accent, and I'm going to give you an example of the way people often talk to me when they speak to me in their lessons with me. A couple of weeks ago, I went to Milan in Italy. And it was very interesting because the cathedral there is very beautiful. And we went inside, and there were lots of people there taking photographs, and I was also taking photographs. And then we came out and we decided to have an ice cream. So we went over to a cafe and we had coffee and we had ice cream, and it was very tasty. And then we went for a walk and we went down an alley, and there was a little restaurant there, and we decided to have some pizza. We sat down, and this isn't even a Russian accent anymore, this is terrible. And we sat down and we had some pizza, and it was very tasty but very expensive. You cannot concentrate on this stuff. You just drift off into outer space because there's nothing there to pull you in. There's nothing there to pull you in. And I've come to realize just how important it is to really use these various strategies for maintaining the attention and the interest of the people that you're speaking to. Otherwise they will not concentrate and they will not be interested in what you're talking about under normal circumstances. Not because they're nasty people, but because the brain doesn't engage with that sort of tedious monologue. A while ago I had a Russian student, and he was probably speaking at a solid B1, borderline B2 level. He made a lot of mistakes. He got a lot of stuff wrong technically, but what he said was alive. He was very good at using these techniques that I've been talking about to really inject a lot of passion and interest into what he said. Like I said earlier, this is not purely about prosody. It's also about the sentences you choose to use and how you structure them, and whether you're a good raconteur and a good conversationalist and all the rest of it. There are various things going on here. It's not straightforward, but these prosodic matters, intonation, dynamics, structure, timing, these things are very important in speaking a foreign language. And you're doing an awful lot of this stuff without actually thinking about it even in your own language. And you really have to think about dragging this stuff across in some fashion from your own language into your target language. As you aim for more advanced levels of ability. By that, I do not mean that these things are going to function in exactly the same way in your target language. I mean, you have to drag that broader sensibility across from your native language into your target language. You have to make sure that it doesn't get left behind, because if it gets left behind, you're going to end up talking the way I was talking a few minutes ago there, when I was pretending to have been to Milan. It's a real shame to make an effort to learn a language and end up speaking it in that flat, dead, lifeless fashion. And that's it for today. Rant over. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks very much for your attention. I appreciate it. And I will hopefully see you again in the future. Thanks very much. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.